Hey, hello again. Today I'd like to talk about tuning your suspension. In this case, it's a Fox suspension 140mm travel on a Cube Stereo Hybrid 140 HPC SL 62529. For that, you need a little bit of equipment, and you need to go on the website of the manufacturer, in this case ridefox.com, and download the instructions for your shock and for your fork. But before you do that, you take a little bit of a port. It always helps to start a good dive down. Very nice. So after you've done that, let's have a look. Here's the PDF that you need to download. You need to make sure you've identified correctly the fork and the shock you have on your bike by having access to your equipment. So in this case, it's a Fox 34 Rhythm with a e-bike tuning. In the back, the shock is a Fox DPS Evol. It also has a custom tuned ID, Delta Yankee Mike Mike. You could use it to identify the fork exactly in case you have any doubts. Both the fork and the shock have three settings: air pressure, that goes in here, the rebound, and the compression. Compression blue, rebound red. Same thing here on the fork, but the fork separates the air and the rebound functions, compression and rebound. So in this, on the left side, you pump air. This will work like a normal coil, metal coil suspension, but in this case it replaces metal by air, pressured air, that you will pump in here. And on the other side, then you have the settings. In blue, it's compression, meaning when you push in, how quickly the oil inside the fork will move away, so that you can quickly go down. And below you have a rebound setting in the red knob, and it will determine how quickly the fork will rebound back. And those two settings will then determine how lively the fork is, if it is always going up and down, or when you compress, if it's dampening the return, absorbing some of that energy, so that your wrists don't get all the bumps out. I'm somebody who appreciates a plush suspension, and here on the instructions you are going to see how to adjust that. So let's have a look at the fork first. I have identified the Fox 34 Echo Rhythm, downloaded the PDF, and the Fox says that 15% of sag is firm and 20% is plush. What do they mean by 15 and 20? Well, if you have a travel of 140mm, which is my case, and how do I know? Well, I went to the Cube manufacturer website to have a look, but I can also take a tape measurement, which is one of the equipment that you will need, and I have a look, and it's 145. So I confirm that if I want 20% of 140 is indeed 28mm. This is what I'm shooting for. To do that, I will need then to know how much PSI I need to pump in that left part of the fork. And here I will look for the rider weight between 210 and 220 pounds, or 95 to 100 kilos. You will need to pump in that left part of the fork 100 PSI. Okay, good. This, the manufacturer says, is a starting point. Then you can adjust it to your own preferences. You can add or remove some of that air. Then they have indications on how to set the rebound. In my case, my fork does not have only 14 clicks. It has 21 clicks. So instead of setting 4 clicks away from fully clockwise, which is a closed position, a slow rebound position, I will look to set 6 or 7 clicks. And for the compression, the grip compression adjust is this model here, and it has no real position. You can adjust it as you want, and then the rest is discussions on how to set the axle. And finally, about the clip-on volume spacers. I'm not quite sure if my fork has volume spacers pre-installed from factory, because I asked at the shop, they said none. So that would be the 34 rhythm, but in this case I have a 34 speed pedelec, and the configuration there would be 3 spacers from factory. I think this one is correct, but I'll have to check later. And I think it's correct because I was never able to bottom out the suspension when I'm riding. I always have this bit remaining, and this is what the spacers do. They add that extra, they remove that extra space, and the compression is much more, they call it progressive. I would like to have a much plusher ride with the full travel available, so I will ask them to remove, if there's 3 spacers, I'll ask them to remove 2. Good. So to then set the correct pressure in both the shock and the fork, you will need one of these, which is a air pump for the suspension. You can see it's very thin, it's made of metal, and it has a pressure measurer, and on the outer scale is the PSI. As you can remember, for the shock I need to go up to 100. So let's have a look, for the fork up to 100. Now let's have a look at the shock. They tell you that the preparation, you need to put the shock in open position, and if you want a plush ride, you need to go for 30% sag, which is 17 millimeters out of 55. Okay, this is good. I started testing a while ago, and I came up with a number of 230 psi, and I tested, it worked for me. This is what I have pressed on, and with the 230 psi you come on this table and you set the rebound to 5 clicks out of 11 or 12, but in my case I have 14, so I'll say 6 clicks as well for the rebound adjustment, away from closed. Voila, and I don't have any volume spacers in there. They also tell you in the instructions that when you pump air, you will need to compress the suspension 10 to 20 times to equalize the pressure in the valves, in the chambers that they have in there. Okay, so for that I'm going to use the tool that I have here. I'm going to connect it here, and let's have a look at the pressure inside of the shock. Okay, let me adjust. Also, yeah. All right, good. Adjust this up a little bit higher. Like this, I guess. And I'm going to pump some air, and now I can see exactly how much I really have in there. So initially I just pumped to equalize the pressure in here, and now that I'm fully on, I can see that I have 230 psi. So 200 plus 1, 2, 3. I need to pump a little bit more. Okay, now I'm at 230. Once I'm done with the correct psi. By the way, if you want to remove pressure, you just have to turn this knob and look at the dial, and then you see that the pressure is reducing, and select the appropriate pressure. I'm going to pump a little bit more. Okay, good. Now I remove the pump, and I'm going to compress it a few times before I do my sag test. I'll show you how to do the sag test if you are alone. Okay, so that's the shock. Let's have a look at the fork. So the fork previously had a cap on it. Looks like this. Okay, so now we were looking for 100 psi for my weight. Let's have a look if that's what we have in there. Okay. All right. Takes a while. All right, 100 psi. Yeah, that's what it is. 100. Good. I have pre-selected this, of course, because it's been adjusted to my own weight. But usually from the factory you will not get all of this correctly dialed in. So what I'm going to do now is put this back on. Yeah. All right. You don't have to tighten it very firm, just give it a little push. Then you come back here and you put this cap on in here as well. Then you go for a short ride to compress 10 to 20 times the suspension. All right. Good. Let's do that. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. Okay. Good. Feels good. All right. Now we go back in here. Good. Now, to do the sag test, you need to set the bike on a flat floor. If you are alone, you need something to step on. In this case, I have a small chair. And you need to don all your equipment. In this case, I have a camel pack, a bag with 3 liters of water. So that's, let's say, and the equipment and the bag, it's 4 extra kilos. You need to put all your equipment on, the extra tubes. If you use a water bottle, put it on. If you have a helmet, you have gloves, put them on, like if you were riding. And this is the correct way of testing the sag. Then you will take the bike out of the stand, because it will change the indications. You will not jump on the bike, but just sit on it gently. You hold one of your feet on the bench, on the chair, and then you will set the O-rings to 0, both of them. Okay, then you lift your foot slowly. All right, you can stand up on your bike so that you compress both the front and the rear suspension. Okay, you do that without jumping on the bike. Once you've done it, you step out without pressing on the bike. Do everything gently, put it back on the stand, and then you look at the rings. And in my case, I said it was we needed 17 millimeters on the shock, and I have cut a toothpick to the right dimensions. 17 is this mark here, and the full length is what I need for my front fork, which was, I'm lost in my paperwork, 28. Okay, so I have here 28 millimeter toothpick, and once you've cut it, you can put it aside with the equipment of the bike, with your instructions. You can tape scotch it here, and you can use it for the next time. So let's have a look if I have set the pressure settings correctly, and look here. Perfect. So you see the black dot just above my finger. That's the recommended plush setting for this bike. Good. And let's have a look at the fork. Okay. And the fork needs perhaps a little bit more air pressure, because the roll ring went too far up. So I'll go for 105 psi. But in my case, I really do like the fork to be quite plush, and to absorb all those roots and rocks coming at me, especially when I'm going uphill. And I want that front wheel to get out of the way instead of pushing me back when I'm already putting all my weight in the back wheel and I almost on a wheelie position. So for me, I would say this is correct. Then I will go for the ride, and I will feel how the bike is responding. To finish the setting, like the manufacturer said, you need to set the rebound characteristics. So they say first close it completely, not the blue one but the red one. Okay, and then click back 6 clicks. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Same thing on the fork. So I'm going to put it in the fully closed position, which is this way. Then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Once I've got that dialed in, I will go out and see if it's too lively or if it's just perfect. Also, one other thing. Remember that your suspension starts with your tires. If you have a 29-inch wheels with 2.6 width, which is the case here, there's a lot of volume in there, so you don't need such high pressure to avoid pinch flats. You can deflate the tires to the minimum, or you can inflate the tires to the minimum recommended settings. In this case it's 17 psi. I have inflated mine to 15 because it works for me, my weight. If I'm on the road and I need to turn, the profile does not deform as much, so I can go down to 15 but not less, because after a while it will start deforming and I lose control. It feels wobbly on the turns. But 15 for me is good, both rear and front, and the tires will be your first line of defense against so many rocks and holes and roots, and they will help absorb some of that terrain, and you don't have to transfer all of that to the suspension. Alright, so I have then correctly set everything on my bike. Now I go for a ride and I play with it a little bit to see if it's exactly what I needed. It feels good. The travel is working fine, the rebound as well. And that concludes our suspension settings. If you have any questions, please feel free to put everything in the comment section. I'll try to respond. Ciao, ciao.